let's talk about drip irrigation and the different drip irrigation systems I have set up around our raised beds in the vegetable garden and also around the landscaping beds in our, immediate yard around the house. Drip irrigation's been really great and I'm a huge fan of it because it just, eliminates a big step in gardening. Everything gets the right amount of water it needs and you don't have to spend hours watering your plants, especially when you have a really large garden. I have a drip irrigation video on our YouTube channel talking about how I set up the drip irrigation in the raised beds over in our vegetable garden, which we'll walk over there in a second. But I've had a couple requests for updated videos on how we do drip irrigation elsewhere and how the raised bed drip irrigation is working for us. So this is that updated video. We're going to start over here in the new landscaping bed because you can still see the drip tubing pretty easily over here. Once the plants fill in and get large, you don't even see the drip irrigation really, which we'll walk over and I'll show you some more established garden beds that are in the landscape around our home, and you can see the drip tubing pretty much just disappears. So for the actual drip tubing itself, over here in the new garden bed area next to our garage, this thin black tubing right here is what we're using for our irrigation system. There are several different ways you can go about installing irrigation into your gardens. However, this is just the method I use and the method that works for me, and I've been happy with the success of. So let's actually back up a little bit before I talk about this little tubing and talk about the header tube. So the header tube is basically what it sounds like, is this big, thicker, I think this is 1/2 inch header tube, and I'll have all the links to everything I'm using in the description box below. But this is the header tube. And then from the header tube, I went through and attached with this little hole punch the 1/4 inch tubing, which the 1/4 inch tubing has emitter holes every few inches on it. And that is where the water comes from, that little yellow hole right there. And that drips a slow water out into the garden. You can see this 1/4 inch tubing I have kind of circling around each of the bigger shrubs here in this garden area. By it circling around the plant itself, it's getting to the roots, and you don't want it right up against the trunk. You want it around what's called the drip line, which is a few inches around the base of the plant. Basically, when a shrub gets big, you want to move that out a little bit because as the plant grows, the drip area line will move as well. One of the great things about the drip irrigation system is that everything is movable. Things are just staked down with stakes. For the header tube itself, I just have these landscaping staple stakes. Then for the drip tubing, I have these little black stakes that just kind of push straight into the ground to keep things down tight so you don't trip on anything. And the tubing just clips right in place. Let me show you what this tubing looks like in a more established bed where you can't even see the tubing as is. This is a big hydrangea right here, and you can't even really tell where the tubing is unless you get up close, and then you can see the tubing right there. All the irrigation around the landscaping beds around our house is set up on automatic timers. Let me walk over to the raised bed garden and I'll show you the timer system we have set up over there because it's pretty much the same as over here, and you can see it a lot better on this hose bib. As we're walking over here to the raised bed vegetable garden, I'm just looking at everything. It's so green and lush, and everything would be dead right now if I didn't have this drip irrigation. The drip irrigation saves so much headache. It's been 100 degrees for pretty much every day the last week, and that would have killed all of these plants because I was not coming out here and watering everything in 100-degree weather while I'm very pregnant. So let's talk about the irrigation setup we have in this garden bed. So rather than the 1/4-inch tubing, I have what's called drip tape here. There are still emitter holes. I believe these are every 6 inches here. But the drip tape, I have heard that it has less likelihood of clogging than the drip tubing does, the thinner stuff. And when you turn a corner, you just use a connector with a corner, and this screws on and off to slide it in. But once you get it set up, you don't ever really have to readjust it. The drip tape itself, I think, is a little bit easier to set up than the 1/4-inch tubing that's in the landscaping beds. But both are pretty simple. All the landscaping beds around the house, it probably only took me about an hour or so to set that up. In my garden beds, I do have a shut-off valve at each garden bed. Now, that is a bit extreme, and I don't really ever turn off the shut-off valves. So maybe that was a little bit unnecessary and extra on my part, but I did want the ability, if I wasn't planting up the entire garden here behind me, that I could shut off a bed that maybe is empty to save some water. But let's be real, I have planted up the entire garden, all 50 some beds that we have. But you can see here at the end of each bed individually, I have a shutoff valve, which is basically just a hose spigot that the drip header tube runs into. And this is the header tube here. Same header tube that we have over in the landscaping beds around the house. The only difference is from this header tube, instead of having that little 1/4-inch tubing, we have the drip tape plugged in. One of the main reasons I went with drip tape instead of the 1/4-inch tubing here in the vegetable garden is because I have heard, like I mentioned, that the drip tape is less likely to clog. And with a vegetable garden, you are constantly planting it up every year and pulling weeds and working in the garden versus over in the landscaping beds around the house. Yes, you're planting, but you're not planting nearly to the same level that you are in a vegetable garden. And all that digging, moves the dirt, and that dirt can then get on the tubing and potentially clog. Now, with that all being said, I have never had any of my irrigation clog or get stopped up. It's always all worked great, and I've never had any issues. As far as how long you let your irrigation run and how long, you let your garden receive water, that's going to depend a lot on your climate. Just for an example, here where I am in Virginia in zone 7, we've had 100-degree days all week. I have had the water run every other day this past week because it's been just so hot. But a couple times a week, having a heavier soak of water is better than every day having a little bit of water. You have to remember, this is a drip system. So it's just letting out a little bit of drips of water, and that water then soaks into the ground. It's not like a huge hose soaker. Also, when you're setting up your timer on your system to run, I would set it up early in the morning. That's what we do. Because you want that water to have a chance to soak into the dirt and to actually get to the roots of your plants, and your plants to have enough time to soak up that water. If I were to run it right now, when it's probably 100 some degrees right now, the water would probably just evaporate, and the plants would not have the opportunity to soak it up fully. And also, when you water your plants in the hottest part of the day, sometimes that can cause shock to your plants and actually do more harm than good. So for the timer setup, over here, this is our timer. So we have our garden divided into 3 zones. And on this, it tells you the time, and it says the next cycle will start in 14 hours. And you can adjust all that just by twisting the dial and customize it to be whatever you want. There's also a filter here to catch any sediment or debris, and then a pressure regulator. The pressure regulator will depend on your own pressure. I've used Drip Depot for all of my irrigation needs, and their customer service is really great about helping you figure out what pressure regulator and everything you need. We have ours piped underground. We have PEX tubing that then pops up into every corner of the garden beds to give just a cleaner look. Although, you know, there's tons of weeds right now. I like, though, that there's no tubings through the paths to trip over or get tangled up on. You could have your tubing just running like a garden hose straight on top of the paths to each of your raised beds and then going from raised bed to raised bed. We chose just to bury it and use PEX pipe so that, you know, it's out of sight, and hopefully eventually we'll make the garden look nicer and cleaner and put together once we get our paths sorted. I hope this was helpful and that kind of answered some of your questions about drip tubing. Yes, I'm still happy with it. Yes, I think it is one of the best investments that I've ever made for the garden, and highly, highly recommend it. I do have an affiliate link to Drip Depot in the description box if you want to order drip tubing. If you click on the link and then do your shopping, I do get a little bit of a commission from them. But I have paid for all the drip tubing and irrigation in my raised bed garden and over around the house with my own money, and I would do it again in a heartbeat because it saves me probably 2 hours of watering every time I need to water. And my plants are healthier, which means I have better harvests because of all that irrigation system. Hope this was helpful. Leave any comments or questions you have about it in the description box, and I'll try my best to answer them. I also have those videos detailing exactly how to set up the PEX underground and the beds, irrigations on top themselves as well. If you want more specifics, you can find those on our channel. Thanks for watching. Bye, y'all.